least in these incredibly awful times, it's a question and a suggestion. I think that's low-lying fruit because we're all much more comfortable now with low-hanging fruit, sorry. We're much more comfortable now with this format. But if we did eliminate the commission travel so that these meetings were all in this format, would there be an increase in IT or anything that I'm not thinking about?
There shouldn't be. You know, if we meet in this format through Teams, there's no additional charge. This is a part of the charges that we're already paying. So there wouldn't be an increase in expenditures for the use of Teams, no. If everybody's comfortable sitting at their office or in their home or wherever and using this format for meetings, there would be no additional cost.
This is Joni in Tonopah. I don't have a problem with that at all. If we can just do one annual meeting in person, at least, so we can just stay connected with each other.
This is Chris. I apologize. I would agree with both ladies. I think training is very key to what we need to make sure we do, and I would not feel comfortable with cutting that. But right. I do think the travel piece could be done.
Yes.
And we do want to clarify one thing. We did receive over $19,000 for training from the interim finance. This does not include those funds. So this training of $15,000 was apparently slated for our department only to go to training. So as you know, we were planning on going to Kentucky this past year to attend that training, but we could move part of the fund from the training for us. We could either move that into the training that we want to provide to all rural indigent defense attorneys, or we could take part of it and apply it to this debt if necessary.
I think with doing our mission, then applying some of that training dollars that it may not be needed internally to assisting some of the counties might not be a bad idea.
So what would that do? I'm sorry.
She was saying that moving our in-person training to the rural counties would be a good idea.
Okay. Anybody else comments or questions? I suspect we should take a motion on this just to keep it clean. And I think it's a great idea if we can continue to use the virtual mechanism. It's sometimes hard to use a meeting by this format, but as we go along, it seems like we'll all get a little better at it. So Joni, do you want to make a motion on where we go on this?
Yeah, my motion, Mr. Chair, would be that we continue to use the Microsoft version of virtual meetings. And you, what else do you want me to say on that, Mr. Chair?
That was it. But one other comment that you made about taking it from.
Oh yes, and yeah, that we hold virtual meetings and have one face-to-face meeting each year.
And it will solve the budget this time.
Well, it will help. It'll help.
By taking in-state travel and commission travel and moving it into.
We can't take in-state, that would take away
just commission.
This commission.
But that's 10 grand.
10 grand. Okay.
Well, should we save a portion of it for that one meeting? Because once we take money out, we can't put it back in, is my understanding. Is that correct, Jason? If we take money out, correct. We can't put it in.
If we were to move $4,600 from out-of-state travel around, it would be very difficult for them to approve putting money back, asking for travel. Once you decide you don't want to use it, the IFC, even before then getting through the budget office, they would have a very difficult time letting you put money back into the account you moved money from. So the other thing I do want to just point out, though, that the commission travel category has $10,655 added with the 4,600 doesn't quite get us to the shortfall of the 20,000. So there would be some training money or something else, whether that's in-state travel or I think the more comfortable place using it is from training. It does reduce some of the money, but if you're going to meet one time per year face-to-face, the commission travel, we'd have to come up with a estimate for how many people and total costs, and we would only be able to reduce the commission travel by the difference.
And see, the problem with the meeting, I mean, I agree, Joni, completely. But the problem with the meeting is wherever we have it, we're gonna have a lot more people traveling than we currently would have even if we kept virtual meetings. Because if we have it up north, everybody from Clark County is gonna need to come up and the incoming from the rurals. So
Yeah.
that, I mean, I agree with you, but these are, I think right now, if we could just release that, then we would cut less of the monies that are really needed to just keep moving forward.
I agree.
Could someone restate exactly what the numbers are so we know what we need to save and where we're still short? And then if you could elaborate on if the out-of-state money goes away, if we pull that to offset the budget cuts, it never comes back, then I'd say leave $1 in it to let them know that there was something. I don't know, but.
So this is Jason, and I'll recap that. The out-of-state travel budget for FY21 is $4,610. The commission travel is $10,655, and the training category is $15,817. The projected shortfall in the information services category and operating at this time is $20,357. And I'll address the moving money out of out-of-state travel. Leaving $1 there only means you have $1 that you didn't spend. If you left $1 in it, it doesn't leave the door open to move money back. If you moved $4,609 out, they're not going to let you put any more money back into it. I would say, you take all or a portion. If you knew you had an out-of-state travel request that was going to cost $1,200, you'd leave that $1,200 in there and move the rest. You wouldn't just leave $1 as a token to, leave the door open. I think, even further out, we're short in operating beyond $979. There are going to be additional needs that we are going to have to revisit, but this is the immediate need for, information services that'll come up after the first few months. We will be revisiting things as the year goes on.
Thank you, Jason. That helps a bit. So at this point, it looks like if we eliminated the out-of-state travel and the commission travel, that would only raise $15,265, and we still need another about $5,000, is what you're saying.
Correct.
And we have $19,000 separate from this for training for whom versus the $15,000 that's the training in the budget.
The additional training money was requested in April at the IFC from the contingency fund, and that is related to the time tracking and caseload software that we're trying to contract with at this time. It is something that we could kind of commingle the dollars. It's in a different category, the money, but it is still considered training money.
Jason, I think the 19,000 was specifically for the attorneys, for us to put on a training, and we requested funds to pay the per diem and provide the training for free for all the rural attorneys. So that's what we had slated the 19,000 for. Mm-hmm. But I guess our proposal would be to reduce training, our agency training, by the $4,000, because we can receive our training through the same training that we're putting on for the rural attorneys. We're planning on attending that, so I don't think we're planning on going anywhere out of state. So I guess, as Jason said, the department would recommend emptying the out-of-state travel, reducing commission travel, and reducing training.
Okay, that makes better sense now. I feel more comfortable because I do think the training component for the attorneys in the rural areas is very key. So if that's separate and we don't need to touch that, then you can then you can reduce your in-house training to make up that difference. And that may still give you a little bit of flexibility, Mr. Chair, if the board wants to have a one-time meeting in person, then you'd still have close to 10,000 sitting in that fund that maybe at a later date we could decide what to do with.
All right. Any questions on that approach? Jody, get ready for a motion.
I have a motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman, and I believe Laura seconded it.
Yeah, did that have the budget numbers in it? I didn't call that. Oh, yeah. Jason?
Joni, if you want to either amend your motion or withdraw it and then start over, then I apologize for making it out so convoluted.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll amend it, but please tell me how am I amending it?
I would suggest you amend it to state that the board recommends that the 4,610 from board travel. No, wait, that was something else. I'm sorry, the 10,655, the 4,610, and be utilized to reduce the shortfall, with the remainder made up out of the in-house training fund. And the intent is that if revenue exists in any one of those three categories in the near future, that the board then meet in person at least one time a year.
All right, that is my amendment. Please don't make me restate that.
All right.
Me neither.
There's a motion by who made the second?
I did, Fitzsimmons.
All right, everybody clear on what this motion is?
Yes.
All right, on the motion, discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Hey, Joni, can we do one more motion? And I can do it, but probably better coming from you, that we make every effort to meet once in person.
I believe that was included in my amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Just want to make sure that we get down
Yeah.
to tone about. All right. All right. All right. Anything else on this item? Marcy, we okay then?
Yes.
Okay to move on? Okay, let's take up item number 5, the annual report to the board.
Yes, we are required pursuant to NRS 180.410 to create an annual report and to submit it to the Nevada Supreme Court, the legislature, and the office of the governor by July 1st. We are requesting permission to submit the annual report that we've given you to the board or to those entities, or would request clarification if you need any sort of changes to the annual report. So we're asking if we can pass this on and submit it.
Do you need a motion on that?
We do.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I didn't get who seconded. Chris, okay. On the motion, further discussion? Anybody?
I'd just like to say, I thought it was a fabulous report.
It was, yes.
Heavily weighted to the rurals on purpose. So, on purpose. All right, on the motion, further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried, unanimous. Okay, let's move on to item number 6. This is the update on the RFP request. Marcy, this is yours too. You want to weigh in on that?
Just to give the board a little bit of information, I believe previously we had requested permission to release the RFP, which was granted, but we weren't necessarily granted permission to enter into contracts with the winning bid. We have evaluations meetings scheduled for June 22nd, 2020 to determine the winning bid for the weighted caseload study. And we have an evaluation meeting scheduled for June 26th, 2020 to determine the winning bid for the data analyst. So we are requesting permission once the evaluation committee determines the appropriate person for the contracts to allow our agency to go forth with entering into that contract.
Is anybody on the phone here? I'm on the evaluation committee. Marcy, you?
It's confidential.
Oh, why is Blue that?
It's.
I'm not on it.
What committee?
Yeah, what committee?
I'm in the wrong room.
Remind us not to trust you with any military secrets.
That's a good idea, man. All right. All right. I'm just saying, this is a real pain to read this. All right. Anybody have any questions about this one?
Well,
Pretty quick.
Mayor, this is Jeff.
Okay.
Drew and I called Marcy yesterday because I did have a little bit of concern on this topic. Even though this is exactly, they've done exactly what we asked them to do. That's not the concern. My concern is that whoever we hire to do a study is going to want a baseline set of timekeeping. And it seems to me we should make that baseline timekeeping both by the institutional offices as well as the private contract attorneys to be based on where we settle down to actual normal. For example, down here in Clark, we haven't even moved to jury trials yet again. And so it's not going to be really possible for them to track how long each type of specific case might take. And so if we don't get good baseline data, it's going to be hard for any expert we hire to come up with good workload standards moving forward. Secondly, I believe Marcy has told me that the software that we want to acquire, that we do have money in the budget to try to do, but it won't be available likely until March of next year. And of course, if they're telling us March of next year, we all know it won't be March of next year because it's IT and it'll be after that. And as a consequence, I worry about jumping in here with an RFP and a contract that says we have to expend all of our money by June 30th of next year, because I'm just not sure we would get a really good product. So I took it upon myself to call, well, I actually told Marcy I was going to do this, but I called Jason Frierson yesterday and explained all that to him. He has not yet gotten back to me, but he obviously understands the legislative process really well, and he came back after I spoke with him for a little bit, and he said, so what you're saying is you don't want to spend the money now, but you don't want to lose the money because you want to have a good product and not a rushed product, but your key ingredient is you don't want to give the money back and lose it because of the budget shortfall. And I said, yep, that's the answer.
Yeah.
And I have not yet heard back from him, but in defense of Jason, I didn't call him till yesterday afternoon. So it's not like I gave him a lot of time to call back. And so I just present that as a concern. I see that Franny's here. I'm not trying to mess up the Davis settlement or any of those things by suggesting this. I really, you know, we've got a good committee. We have excellent staff and Marcy and the guys. I just want to have a good product, and I don't think we're going to get a good product if we try to cram it all in with timekeeping things in March and not knowing what the system's going to be like, and yet they have to have the report done by June 30th. I'm just not sure we'll get a good product.
Well, it's something definitely we have to think about, because we're not going to get a good product if we go out and tell everybody during the pandemic that, you know, we're going to take the results from the pandemic and make that a broad statement. So, you know, I really appreciate you reaching out there. But I think
So
that's what we have to do.
So I guess what I'm hoping for, Mayor, and I apologize for interrupting, I guess what I'm hoping for is we could delay this decision till the next meeting, so we can hear back what Jason says. So we'll actually see what the governor's list of cuts are. For all I know, our budget got cut more on his list of cuts that I haven't seen, but maybe you guys have already seen. And if we were going to go and make it longer, we might actually have to do a new RFP. I get that. But that might actually give us even more bidders to choose from if we gave them a more reasonable length of time to do the work. So I know Marcy's done everything we asked her last time. I'm just suggesting this might be a good time to take a slight breather and let Jason get back to us with what he might be able to come up with.
And just to let the board know a little bit of additional information, the chairman did sign that affidavit A that said that we had to execute a contract with a qualified provider for a Delphi study within 12 months after the effective date of the settlement. My understanding is the case hasn't been settled yet, so that time hasn't started ticking. We have a couple of options that I've thought about after we discussed. The first option is if the board would like us to go forward with the RFPs and go forward with the evaluation committee, we could delay our contract with the Delphi study and negotiate additional time if we're allowed to have this money go past June 30th of 2021, sorry. If we enter into a contract by July 7th, 2020, we can be on the Board of Examiners to get that approved by August 11th. And that's what we were hoping to do for this Delphi study. If we don't get the contract negotiated by August 7th, we have to have the contract negotiated by August 4th so that we could make the Board of Examiners meeting on September 8th. So our options could be, we could, according to purchasing, we could just get rid of the RFP altogether and reissue it once we have more information, but it's very time consuming. And if we don't go forward with the RFP, we might not have enough time to get any information if we can't extend this money. Or we could grant the board or the department authority to enter into that contract with the winning bid of what's already been submitted. But if we're allowed to have that money for longer, negotiate a longer study once we know that information and aim for the August 4th date so we can try and get on the September 8th BOE. So those are the options that we've been told by purchasing and looking at what's required under the state.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
this is Franny. Marcy's right. The settlement has not been completed yet, but it's very close to being filed. I have a couple of comments. One of them is that I don't think anybody is interested in having a time study that will end up with the time required per case being too low, which is likely what would happen if you just took straight time records during the pandemic. But what I would be interested in knowing from potential vendors, and I don't know how you do this technically when you've got an RFP out, maybe you can ask additional questions or something of the vendors to submit responses to, is they must be running into this, and what adjustments are they, what adjustments do they make for this? Can you still get a reasonable estimate of the amount of time required by making adjustments to the numbers because you're taking time during the pandemic? One of the things that happens during these time studies is if you have a weak indigent defense system where not enough time is being put into the cases, these studies don't just take the amount of time that weak lawyers and a weak system is putting into cases. I know that because all it would do would just be recording the amount of time they're currently spending, not the amount of time that they should be spending. So I don't know if you can ask additional questions to the vendors to see how those numbers are adjusted, but and I can't bind my whole litigation team on whether or not there needs to be amendment, but it sounds from what you said, Marcy, that what we did was to give 12 months from the date that the case is settled, and that sounds like you have a little over a year.
So then,
Is that right?
yes. So do we want to let these evaluations go forward and then postpone the contract issue until we can talk? I think we could talk to the bidders as long as we say the same thing to both of them. I think that's what you can do. But then we would have that for our next meeting.
Mayor, I would make that as a motion. I think it's fine for them to discuss it, fine for them to evaluate. I just would like to stall the actual award of a contract till we have another meeting.
Understood.
This is Chris. I have a question before you take that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Go, Chris.
Okay. So that makes sense to me. I just want to piggyback on what Franny just said. So then it sounds like Marcy then has an opportunity and/or the evaluation team with Marcy to further refine what we want as an expectation out of this, including the time issue. And that this motion could give her that additional time to be able to do that and then bring it back to the board. Is that what we're looking at?
Well,
It-
yes, so my understanding is that when the confidential individuals look at the RFP and the evaluation process, they have to look at what was actually submitted, but when the individuals choose the winning bid, they could further contact them to contract with additional things that we would want. For example, if we're able to go further out and have a longer study, we could negotiate that with the individual that's the winning bid.
Okay. And then just clarify for me, Marcy, the having to use it by the end of 2021, was that in the statute, in the law, or was that an IFC's requirement, or was that Board of Examiners?
It's an IFC requirement is my understanding, because they can only give you money. We requested to the end of the biennium, which is June 30th of 2021, and we couldn't request any farther than that.
For any further, okay. So we may still have some leeway because of the settlement timeline, and therefore that may give us enough of the time to be able to get the right kind of study completed rather than.
Well, at this point, it would be a hurried study. We would not be able to use our legal server software, which we're hoping to have in place by March. But the IFC doesn't have the authority, I believe is my understanding, they don't have the authority to do anything with money past June 30th of 2021. But I believe
since they're going to go to special session, maybe you get that on the list for the call and see if they could tweak it somehow. Just saying. Sorry.
I know you're laughing, Chris, but I sort of suggested that.
It wouldn't hurt. It's just a minor thing that the governor could just add a line, or however they do it nowadays. It's been 10 years since I've been there, but that just might be something that we shouldn't dismiss if we have an opportunity to do it.
Yep, that's right.
Jeff, is that what you're waiting for,
Ryerson.
yeah, Speaker Frierson to get back to you on?
That's one of the issues. I was also waiting, quite frankly, just to see if you could come back and just tell me that, well, he might not be able to legally float the money past June 30th. He could assure me it would be reinstated for us to go the next year. I would tend to rely on the speaker if he told me that.
Same here. Okay, further discussion on this item? Let me see if we can do this. Let's see if we can entertain a motion to let the evaluations for June 22nd and June 26th for the weighted caseload study and the data analyst go forward. That on the execution of contracts, we're going to ask the staff to extend or delay entering into a formal contract until we at least have some more time under our belt with where we are in this pandemic and where we are with IFC. So that would be, we can bring that back before the next bids meeting. Is that all right?
Yes.
Everybody
Sounds fine.
Okay, Jeff, you want to second that just for the record?
Sure, I will. I second it.
On the motion, discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Both nay, carried. Franny, thank you for your input there. All right, let's take up item 7, legal server.
That's correct. The department was given permission to contract with legal server at the last board meeting, either issuing an RFP or multiple ways. We did request to use another governmental solicitation, and that request was granted. So we will not be required to go through the RFP process. We'll be able to enter into a contract with the dates of the Board of Examiners. And entering into this contract, it appears that they will start working on legal server being installed in September, but it actually won't necessarily go live until February or March. One question that we wanted guidance from the board is whether or not we should create a regulation to mandate that the rural counties use legal server, or whether or not the board intends to allow each rural system or each county to use this legal server on a discretionary basis. Our understanding is in Elko, they spent a lot of money installing a Justware program, which isn't necessarily going to be supported by the end of June 30th, 2021, I believe. We've reached out to them and we're trying to set up a meeting to see if they intend to use it, but some individuals don't necessarily want to use it. They want to continue using what they're currently using. Others are very open to the idea, but our concern is that if it's mandatory, we would have uniform data. You can see in our annual report that the data is not uniform. We're taking what was given us, and it's hard to make anything out of it. So if you mandate it, it'd be uniform. But I know that there's individuals that are opposed to it. So we didn't know how we should start talking. One problem that we're having is we don't have sufficient funds to integrate any information into the system. So we won't be able to pull current cases in. It'll be basically starting from anew. If they want to pull a case in, it'll have to be manually entered. So we'd just like some direction from the board on that discussion.
Well, anybody got any ideas?
Well, as to the, resistance, understandably, of some of the counties to having this, uniform system, I think it needs to be mandated. I understand that it's more work for the counties and they have an investment in training and their own systems, but the bottom line from all this is we're going to be saving the counties money, ultimately. So it's short-term pain for long-term gain. And I feel, based on what you just explained, that it should be mandated.
Marcy, this is Drew. What do you envision in some of the counties that don't have institutional offices? Do you envision that the private attorneys who receive the contract buy legal server and input their data into that? Or is this more, are you looking from data from the courts where each court will put in the data?
It would actually be the attorneys that put in the data. So it'd be a case management system that we would be providing to the counties to provide to all of their attorneys. We would have to pay for the contract attorneys or the public defenders, but the attorneys that just come in for a few cases, the counties would be able to provide them that software as well, free of charge, so we can track what they're doing. So we're planning on giving it to the attorneys for use.
Okay.
I would agree that it needs to be mandatory and consistent. We have too many programs done around the state and we never get the right data. It's kind of like when we were used to collect racial profiling and then they stopped doing it and they don't anymore, and now we don't know anything about anything. So I think the consistency and continuity needs to be there.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
This is I can large experience here in our county. When we originally started almost a decade ago, we contacted with Justware.
You got to speak again, Drew. We're missing you. Hang on a minute. What's going on here with you?
It might be his.
Is it your feed down there?
It could be. I'm
There we
the
go.
counties here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There we go.
Good. Start again, please.
I just wanted to give you our lesson of what we learned. We started this over a decade ago. We contracted with Justware because that's what the Public Defender's Office had, and that's what Special Public Defender's Office had. And we envisioned a system where, with all the attorneys we contracted with, to provide them an internet access to Justware, and they'd input their own case data. It became very clear very early that garbage in, garbage out. And so what we did is we internally kept Justware just for internal staff, and we have our lawyers report case data, quite frankly, the old-fashioned way about what case loads they have, and then we input the data to our Justware/legal server type system. So at least we're comfortable that at least internally we put in the data. When you have outside sources having access to inputting data, it became very nervous that the information was questionable. And as far as requiring everybody to have that, I agree that's in a perfect world, that's great. But even currently down here, we're having issues because, as you said, Justware is terminating their procedures by the end of June 2021. So all the local offices here are contemplating what server to use. The latest go around, the defense was comfortable with the Justware company that bought it. We'd like the DA to be on the same system, but they had a presentation from the new Justware company, and they're not comfortable with it. So we're kind of recircling the wagons. The hope is that everybody down here is on the same system, so the input of information stays somewhat consistent. So from Laura's point, we could mandate it. That'd be great, and I think that's the way to go. But just know you're going to have some hurdles just because of the nature of the variety of personalities involved around the state, and then as well, people who are inputting the information.
That's very interesting. This is Chris. So the DAs get to call out, and they're just, because they weren't on board in the first place.
Well, no, Chris, if you remember, this has been decades in the making. But
I know.
the DA did contract with Justware, and as ironic as it is, their go live was supposed to be this year. Well, as soon as they were going live, Justware pulled the plug and is not going to be supported anymore.
Right.
So, you know, Jonelle, I, Chris Lawley, Darren Emily, we've all been discussing that we like to keep this, but it's apparent that the products that are available, the importance of what each institution wants varies. And so no decisions have been made, so at least we're all still talking, but we're setting up an appointment with somebody, Chris Lawley, our assistant DA, has suggested to see what their capacities are for the defense bar if we feel comfortable with it. But yeah, that's kind of unfortunately where we're at down here.
Jeez. Get a new DA.
This is Jared. Along the same lines, I just wanted to share an additional concern from the ELCO perspective. I believe that both their district attorney and even the court is tied into their Justware system. So they've got a very smooth transition when it comes to discovery and filings, and that's been their primary concern in terms of signing on to another system. Is they're all integrated there. You know, how does that? And, you know, it's still undecided what they're doing in terms of the Justware discontinuation, but that was one of the concerns and should be shared and taken into consideration.
Yeah, and Jared, I assume that the DA doesn't Justware connection is looking as well for the product. And so that should be a coordination of that particular office. Because that was the reason we all worked together, is the transfer of discovery and information would be so much easier if we were on the same platform.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
Staples,
sure.
are you taking comment on this item?
Comment, do it now.
Hi, thanks so much. A couple questions. First of all, I know we probably don't want to name names in terms of who is pushing back on this software, but I wonder, Jared articulated this a little bit, you know, what were some of the...
You just cut off, Dagny.
Dagny, we lost you.
Hi, are you there? Okay. Hi. First point was just a little more detail on, you know, why the pushback, and second, what would be the process for creating the mandate? Would you have to put it in your regulations? Because this board just do it? My only concern from the county perspective would be, you know, a little bit, I know, Marcy, you've done a ton of outreach, I'm sure, because that's what you do and you're good at it. But just a little bit more, maybe sort of communication before a mandate was created. Thanks, you guys.
And we do have the option, like Drew brought up, if we want to allow people to report their time in the manner that we are requiring, they could give it to us and then we could have someone input that data so that we still have the data. They just wouldn't necessarily have to use our system. Part of the pushback is, you know, individuals already have a system in place. All of their information is currently in the system. They don't have sufficient staff to be able to enter all the cases into the new system. And some individuals don't necessarily want to learn it. So we have been reaching out and we are attempting to meet with each county, but we're getting that question of, is this going to be mandatory? And that's why we brought it up to the board of what is the intention of this board? What should we be telling them? Do they have the choice or not? And that's why we're reaching out, because we are in the process of meeting with individuals, but the same questions seem to be coming up.
So Marcy, if you're negotiating with Legal Serve here, or legal server, I guess. Can we negotiate a really bargain basement price if we're going to make it push all over the county as opposed to just you? I mean, that's a lot more customers for them. Maybe we could get a price point that is just so good that in light of the Justware issue, the counties would all be willing to shift.
And I don't know, my understanding is that Aaron Krause has been reaching out to Washoe County. He's the individual with legal server, as well as Clark County, to see if there was any interest in having a unifying system throughout, but he informed me he didn't receive any feedback as to having any interest in looking at legal server in those areas. I think the price that we have.
Well, it depends on who we talk to down here. I have a feeling that our IT department is not really interested in learning about a whole new system, since they already have Justware people. If he reaches out to the actual special public defender, et cetera, he might have a more receptive response.
Did he reach out to him? And we can make contact with Mr. Krause and let him know to contact the public defenders directly. I don't know who he has contacted. I did encourage him to reach out to the public defenders, but he didn't specifically tell me who he reached out to, so I don't know.
Okay.
And Marcy, this is Kate. I can facilitate those discussions here in Washoe County. I know we've been searching for what we will do post Justware, but haven't landed on something yet. If we can say though that this board is pursuing making a statewide consistent mandated, not mandated, pursuing a similar product for everyone, I think that would help nudge in the right direction. I know we were looking at eDefender, I think was one of the products, but that's about all I know.
Yeah, Kate, this is Drew. eDefender is the company that took over from Justware. They have an eDefender product and an eProsecutor product, and that's kind of where we were looking at going, but there's a little bit of hitches. Let me ask you, does Legal Server have a prosecutorial product as well?
I don't believe that they have a prosecutorial product. They are made for public defenders, but discovery can be emailed directly to the server. There's an email address, is my understanding, that's assigned to each case when it's opened. You can provide that to the district attorney, and if they email the discovery to that address, it'll automatically be saved within the file. My understanding is there's individuals and public defenders in Washington. Colorado is moving their public defender system to legal server. So there's a lot of agencies that seem to be going with legal server. So I don't know necessarily all the ins and outs of it, but it does appear to be a good program that a lot of people do like.
Well, that's something we'll look at down here as well, because I do think there would be an advantage if it, statewide, from the defense point of view, we were all on the same platform, and the numbers could be easily compared to each other. So that's a goal. Independent of making that a mandate decision today, I think there should be some agreement. But I think it's almost mandatory to mandate that whoever has a contract, that you have to keep stats of what cases you have and make it part of the contract. That's what we do down here. So internally, our defenders, have the software platform input it. But our private attorneys and those around the states, I think any contract the county makes has to require a reporting. We has to have the numbers reported monthly. And so, whether monthly, quarterly, how can you say, in the manner in which you ask the numbers to be reported, I think that's an important.
I got it.
So maybe instead of mandating now, we continue discussions towards moving towards a statewide uniform system, and then we can, decide if we're hitting a point where we need to implement a mandate, we can move in that direction. But it sounds like there are some promising discussions.
So would the board prefer if we hold off on signing the contract so that Washoe County and Clark County can meet with the representative to make a determination if they like that server, or would you like us to continue moving forward?
I think if there are price benefits to having the two larger organizations on board, that might help with the contract. See if that's a possibility. I don't want to hinder your, I don't want to hinder your progress with them, but maybe if you had us joining on, it might make it a little bit more lucrative for them.
I agree.
I think that makes sense. And then as Drew pointed out, or Marcy pointed out, and Drew commented back on, if there's an easy way that the DAs could enter in that data while they deal with everything else, but they're required to utilize that portion of it, I think that's very important to have.
Mm-hmm.
And this won't necessarily hinder things too much. We do have a proposed contract with them, so we can reach out to see if there is interest. It will put us, we have to have the contract signed by July 7th in order to make the August BOE for the September start. So if we do want to delay, we may not be able to make that September start. It might be an October start, just so the board is aware. It'll push us back a month.
Well, let me ask you, Marcy, if you had it in place in September, what do you envision inputting at that time? Because the rest of the state may not be involved yet. What specific numbers would you put in there?
Well, we would not necessarily have any information moved over. We would be building the system specifically to what the needs of the department is and how we want it set up. If Clark and Washoe are interested, they would basically have their own contracts, I believe, and they would have their own data system. So they wouldn't necessarily be tied to our legal server, but we might be able to have access to it. So that's something that we could reach out to Aaron Krause for, to ask if Washoe and Clark do enter into a contract, would that be something where we could upload those reports? And that's something that we could easily talk to them about. Yeah, because we had talked about separate databases, and we were looking at, do we provide a database for each county so that they all have their own information in each database? But that increased the cost significantly. If we provide a database for Washoe and a database for Clark, and then have the rurals in a separate database, they would all be tied together and we could set it up jointly. So this is something I could reach out to them to get a bid for that and provide you guys with that information to see what we want to do at that point.
So my question, and I guess this is for Kate Thomas and Jeff Wells specifically, would you like that we put Aaron Krause in contact with the two of you directly, or John Arascata and Mark Picker and Jonelle Thomas and Darren Imlay? Who should we direct our conversations with Mr. Krause to?
I'm happy to coordinate on behalf of the public and alternate public defenders in Washoe County. If you want to send it to me, I can call for us to get together. Maybe we can loop in Jeff as well and have some sort of a virtual brainstorming session to see if it works for Washoe and Clark, to see if we can kind of brainstorm in the same room, overcome any obstacles. Jeff, does that work for you?
Jeff, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute. I get so used to people telling us to go on mute because of the feedback on these things. I think initially have them reach out directly to Drew. I know he's on here, but I'm volunteering him. He can bring in Jonelle and Darren, but down here, I suspect the problem is equally, if anything, coming out of IT. So I think that same meeting, Drew, you're going to have to bring Nadia in. Otherwise, I don't think we'll get agreement on one side and they'll still back up on it. So
right, that's what we've done. We're still in the process of scheduling those where we have these type of virtual meetings with the different vendors to show us their products. So I'd be more than happy to coordinate it down here on behalf of the defense bar in Clark County. So that's not an issue. I guess the question. Yeah.
And then I think after that meeting, Drew, you and I can join with Washoe and Kate and talked about a price point or something as a group.
And Kate, if I can ask, in Washoe, what software does the DA's office use in Washoe? Is it Justware as well?
No, I think, well, I know the courts uses Odyssey maybe. I think it's Odyssey that they use.
I just didn't know, because of your public defender having to change from Justware, if there was a coordinated effort up north to merge both the prosecution and the defense so that the stream of information can pass somewhat easily.
Yeah, and that's of course the overall goal. So that's what I have to data mine and figure out. So I'll coordinate that with our folks. I mean, it's good timing that, Justware is no longer going to be supported, because it sort of forces us to make a decision. So the timing is good.
Right. Okay. But going back, Marcy, to your point about contracting with Legal Server, I don't want to destroy any momentum you have, and obviously you have ideas about what type of information you want to track statewide. And if Legal Server provides you that information in a format that you like because you've seen the presentation, I hate to stop that, but I just, still uncomfortable as us as a mandating that it goes statewide yet. The topic can be mandated, but the platform by which it's used, I think we need to sit and think about that a little bit.
So would we be
Chairman,
having Marcy move forward with the contract that she's got in place while the Clark and Washoe continue to pursue Legal Server as an alternative? That way she can still move forward. We can look to try to coordinate statewide, and if we can move in that direction, great. We just all sync up in the fall.
And
Does that work for you, Marcy?
That's fine.
Add to that, unless somebody feels differently, is to somewhat delay the discussion about mandating that Legal Server software statewide.
yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's Joni in Tonopah. I just want to go on record as saying that I would be opposed to anything that would impose another unfunded mandate on any of the counties. I know the rural counties and frontier counties are having particular budgetary problems right now because of the impact to their revenues because of the business closures. But even if they were not experiencing those budget problems, I would still be opposed to anything that imposes an unfunded mandate.
And Joni, at this point, when we went to IFC, we requested funds to install and build the Legal Server, as well as provide it free of charge to all of the rural counties. So at this point in time, we received funds for that.
Okay, that is terrific. I'd still like to go on record as being opposed to anything that would impose an unfunded mandate, but thank you for that, Marcy.
I'll second the unfunded mandate. I get it all the time, Joni.
Yeah, I know you do.
All right, so let's do this. Let's put this.
I need to clarify where we're at. I still think we need to have a statewide system that is consistently used with data. Otherwise, what's the whole purpose? It becomes a sham. And if I were ACLU, I wouldn't be settling anything if we're not really going to capture the data, because we let everybody go off on their own, and then it takes more person power to be able to compile anything. So I guess I'm still kind of confused now about what the direction is.
Well, Chris, let me jump in, because I don't think anybody's in disagreement. This is Drew. Nobody's in disagreement that the information has to be captured. The question just comes down to how to capture that information.
Right, yeah.
And to alleviate some of Joni's concerns, the way I understand these platforms, the way they work, if Marcy through DIDS contracts with Legal Server, then they own, they own the platform, and they provide licenses to the various attorneys who would have to input the information. That's the way it was going to work with us. So not necessarily would the attorneys or the counties have to pay for their ability to have Legal Server. Marcy would control it, and there would be a licensing to the various county agencies to input information. I just can tell you that I was very nervous having outside people put in information, because many of these attorneys, you know, one year you have this attorney under contract, the next year you have another under contract, and so to stay consistent, we mandated a way in which the cases had to be kept, but as far as what was put in our database, we kept that internal. And so that's why I brought up, we may not want to force a particular software on people, but to force a methodology by which they keep track of what kind of cases they have.
Okay, that's a better delineation, Drew. I appreciate that. So I'll go into your latter point, though. How do we get that information in a format that doesn't cost everybody else more time and money just to input it in order to comply with what we want to have them comply with?
I think we as a board can just mandate, look, if you have a contract or if you're providing criminal defense in the state of Nevada, you must keep track of your information in this manner. How many felonies did you receive this week or this month or this day? And the only people who know that are the attorneys who are getting that. And if you analyze the data and realize that they're not providing it accurately, then that puts their contract in jeopody. So as part of the contract that you get to provide legal defense in Nevada, you must tell us what kind of work you're doing. And then the case rating study we're about to have will tell us how much work are you doing on those cases. So you have two components. You have how many cases you got, and then you have an analysis on how much work you're doing, and then as well, there should be an overall, is that appropriate? So you kind of merge those three pieces of information. But for right now, Legal Server just needs to give us numbers, because that's what we found, you know, in our previous commission, that when David Carroll did his study around the state, there was just no comfort level that the numbers reported were actually what was being done. And if some of them were, you had attorneys with 500 to 600 cases, and you know, it just made everybody nervous. And so, are you nervous because that number is right and you shouldn't have that many, or are you nervous that the number they're reporting is inaccurate? And so, I just feel that one of the most important things about our commission is to get a handle on the data, that statewide, how many cases are people getting, and then define.
Can they use your software to report it if they're under contract in the county? That's the question. Yeah, so we're way past anything my feeble mind can understand. But I'm, you know, listening to every good point you made, and I'm probably missing something here, but if part of Marcy, or part of what that department is doing is acquiring software that gathers this information, would it be too much to require that? And my understanding is Marcy's providing licensing for free to the counties and to the practitioners
And their staff.
So really at that point, I understand, and believe me, Joni, about the unfunded mandate, but this is free software. Somebody's going to have to put it in. And if, let's say I have a little law office in Winnemucca, well, anyhow, someplace that doesn't have a PD, and my staff's putting it in, is it really that much to ask that they do that work and they input that so it's all going in so it doesn't have to be altered by our limited staff?
And that's the benefit of legal servers. We can get a case capture of everyone that's kind of hooked into that system. We can pull how many cases they see, and we can see snapshots. Possibly courts could use it, or we could use it to see if they have too much of a workload once we get our workload study. We'd be able to create charts and do all of these things with real-time information that we may not be able to do if individuals are allowed to provide the information to us, and then we would have to input it. It might be a little more delayed in that way, but it's possible. We can input the information, which is more time consuming, or if they're using the software, it could almost be immediate once it's put in.
So Laura, the other answer though for Washoe and Clark, because Marcy did not get money for us, we would have to have licenses down here, someplace like 400 of them on an annualized basis.
Wow.
Actually, probably a little bit more. Plus, we finally have the DA's office, even though they picked old software at the same time, where we have that integration. And we recently, only about 3 months ago, wiped out the old central court system and replaced it so that everybody can communicate into that system. So the courts, the DAs, and the justice courts, we have 11 different justice courts. We have the district court. We have 81 elected judges down here, plus 400 and some lawyers that are doing the defense work. It is not a simple little task to keep the current integration that we have between DA and PD and the courts that we now have again, to come back and yank it out and start changing, because we're going to lose some of the things that we have simply by shifting to the legal server. Now, if it's cheap enough, it works well enough, it might still work, but it's not going to be an easy task. And in our budget situation, like everybody's budget situation, spending, 7 to 10 million more right this minute might not be an easy number.
And Jeff, I'm sorry, I to that point, I was thinking the over under 100,000 population. It wasn't really crossing my mind, because I'm not sure Marcy's going to be pulling in your info and, checking in on either Clark or Washoe.
Well, they still have to report, because we
Yeah,
put that information
right.
in the annual report.
But you guys have a stopgap that other counties don't have, which is you guys are doing that data gathering. So, whatever you go through, when it comes to Marcy, it's just in a different state. I mean, you've done the work, and I was not, in my mind, it was not crossing my mind that the over 100,000 population counties would be mandated anything on this issue.
Okay, you just worried me for a minute, that's all.
Well, I wasn't clear.
This is Julie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I just want to say, I just want to put on the record too, that I would be against any mandate right now. I would want time to make sure we know, like, especially the example of Elko, if they have a system that's working smoothly, I'd want to make sure that we're coordinating with the counties and not just enforcing a new mandate that may not fit if they can get the right data in a different format. So good for you. Thank you.
Was mandates, unfortunate.
The mandate. But it seems to me that
Require.
it seems to me that we might be able to make some progress on this if we delay this issue until the next board meeting. We could tell the practicing lawyers out there that, yeah, we're thinking about going down a requirement stage, but we really need to see the regulations first. So we'd ask our staff to bring back the proposed regulation requiring it, then we could debate that, and also that would be out there in the public so that all the public defenders in the counties could see what that language is going to be as well before we adopt it. It's not the only thing I think we can do.
Can we make a motion? I wholeheartedly agree.
Okay. Everybody okay with that motion?
Yeah, I'm fine, Mayor, as long as in part of that, Marcy or Jared or somebody goes ahead and helps us coordinate having that meeting with our public defender group and IT and legal server all at the same time.
Yes, we will email once we are completed with the meeting.
All right.
So this is Julie. I'm not sure I quite understood the motion.
Well, the motion is to delay taking an action on this until the next regular board meeting. But then we would, at that next meeting, we would have the regulation drafted so we could actually see what the wording of the regulation, and others who are looking at the agenda could also see what the regulation is, or we could use the word requirement and not mandated, stuff like that, and also make sure that the motions, that the regulation says it's provided free to the 15 counties and their staff, the public defenders, the defense attorneys out there. I think that might ease some of the concern, because this is going to be this is gonna be difficult no matter what we do. That's right.
Mr. Fair,
Mr.
this
Chair.
is Kate.
Sure.
Is that going to help Marcy sign the contract, though? I mean, I know we're not going to meet before she needs to get that executed. If I don't know what the hindrance is there.
There is no hindrance there, Kate. We are paying for up to 100 users. It's one set price. So if everyone doesn't use it, it'll be the same price as if up to 100 individuals use it. So that doesn't change.
So we're not delaying your ability to sign the contract, just the mandate.
Just
Yeah, and can we stop using the word mandate?
requirement.
Really, because that is a trigger for all of us that have sat through years of this. Can we say require?
Require.
And this is Julie again.
What's the difference?
I
I mean, if it's required, it's
Take it the same
mandated.
way.
Because Julie, everybody, the counties for every session and every study group have rightfully talked about the whole concept of unfunded mandates for everything we're doing. And then there's a lack of justifiable, a lack of confidence by many of the counties that the state's going to require work case standards and other things in contracts and isn't going to step up and pay for it. So the counties have been concerned for 10 years, at least, about unfunded mandates. So it has a financial implication that the requirement of the use of software should not get commingled with.
Okay.
This is Julie again.
Yeah, go Julie.
So in the meantime, can we also, I don't know, maybe if I'm the only one, but I'd like to know which counties have been spoken to and who has concerns, because one thing I get out here is I'll show up in court and I'll have a judge going, so what is that department doing now? So I'd like to at least know kind of who had the concerns. I know you mentioned Elko County. I can call the chief public defender and kind of get her thoughts on it. But I'd like to be able to reach out to the others in the rurals that have concerns about the, a required uniform system.
Well, we are in the process of reaching out to all of the counties, and we're requesting meetings with them, virtual meetings. Some counties have gotten back to us. Some counties have told us to talk to the attorneys directly. Some counties are willing to meet with us with the county manager. So the same question keeps coming up of whether or not this will be required, and we didn't know what to tell them. That's why we brought this up for discussion. It doesn't necessarily need to be a regulation, but we are willing to do a proposed regulation for the next meeting. But we didn't know if this board was expecting them to use that software or if it was going to be discretionary. So we didn't know the answer to that.
Do you know?
We still don't.
Well, that's why I think we need a little bit of time, and I really think it's important that we have the language about the requirement of this legal server be in print so that we can all see that, so that there's a degree of comfort that stuff isn't getting shoved down everybody's throat. I mean, they're going to feel that to a degree anyway, but at least they're not going to be asking for money.
One other thing to bring up is in the Delphi workload study, they will be required to participate. If they're participating in that study, they will be required to use either legal server if it's in place or a software provided by whoever is chosen. So our department felt it was better if we were doing a work study anyway, and we could get people to learn how to use our software. And if that was going to be used, it may be best to require individuals to record their time in that way. But we are open. We understand the concerns that we're hearing, but we didn't know what the board would feel.
So speaking to Julie's concern and the mayor's motion, I think if we get something just drafted, it can be circulated with the agenda. Julie, that should also help you, in your conversations with the counties. We'll all know what we're talking about, and then they can say to you, well, that doesn't work for X, Y, or Z reason. Right? But I mean, then if we postpone it a month and get something that is concise and clear and get it out, and maybe even ahead of time, Julie, to you, or whoever else is going to be going and talking with the county managers, then we'll know more. And this is something that their voices should be heard on.
Somebody trying to talk?
No, this is Julie again.
All right, Julie, go.
Yep. Okay, my only concern is I've, gotten some feedback on those standards, and we had told everybody that we were going to have that workshop, and I know with the COVID virus, we weren't able to do that. But then they were submitted to the Legislative Bureau, and I think some folks feel like they were left out of that process. I know I've explained that they'll be able to comment once we get them back, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't feel like this board or the department is just unilaterally drafting these things and then saying you can send a comment and then we may or may not listen to you. So that's why I just thought if we had a little more conversation time.
Well, if we do, I think we can get that conversation time. And I agree with Laura. I think it's important that we have something in writing so that people can see that. And try to go down that road. I don't know if there's any other way out of this, because it's going to be people changing software programs is difficult. So, I guess my sense is that whatever this board wants to do, my sense is that we're better off if we take some time, get an actual regulation drawn up. And for those, Julie, you know the drill as much as I do, that we send it over to LCB, because if we do we do a workshop, we send it over to LCB, they change it. If there's a substantive change in there, then we got to go back to another workshop. So, I think most agencies are saying, okay, LCB, if you have a legal right to weigh in on this, say it's good or bad. But we don't want to have to do it twice to them.
So are we still, is the department still to move forward with contracting Bill Server?
I think what Jeff has, maybe we can get a different, I don't know, maybe the prices can't deal with that, but there may be some things we can do to reduce that price just to us. Because it seems to me that there's one consistent set of software program like Legal Server, and I confess I don't know the difference between all the different software programs, but I think it makes a lot of sense to have a uniform. I think it makes a lot of sense if we can get buy-in if we can from the counties and the county public defenders. So that's why I think we may just need a little bit more time. And whoever said it, you don't have to say we're thinking about that. Just say we're going to put it together an actual regulation to look at that, and we'll have it out. See what everybody has to say.
But it wouldn't be a regulation.
No, it's
an action item.
An action item.
Yeah. So we don't have to go through that whole process.
I think we can do that. I don't know. Might have to be a regulation.
Oh, you're right.
It should be a regulation. I think it should. Okay. So where do we want to go, board? Julie, what do you want to do?
I think it was Joni that said earlier, if we could just hold off on making any kind of action on whether it's a requirement or not, that let Marcy move forward with the contract and, continue these conversations. I think that was Joni's proposal.
It wasn't, but I agree with it.
Thanks,
All
Joni.
right. So let's take a motion to table this item until Marcy brings it back, and ask at the same time, that motion would say bring back a draft regulation that says how we're going to go about choosing a software server for the state, so that we can put that out so everybody knows that they're not going to get charged for it, what it can do. And also, it makes sense because I think a lot of them are dumping off because the other software programs are being carried forward after next June. So if we're going to make a change, I guess this is the time to make a change. Anyway, that's my sense. Listen to the discussion.
So I believe Julie was moving for us to continue moving forward with the contract.
Right.
But to bring a regulation that we could propose.
You said it was more succinctly than I.
Just, okay, for clarification.
And I'll make that motion.
Good, okay.
That
was Joni, wasn't it? Or was it Julie?
Yes, it was. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. It was Joni Eastley.
You never have to apologize to me, Joni. Okay, go. Motion's in order. You want me to, why don't you state it again?
I believe that Joni's motion is to allow the department to move forward with contracting with legal server and to request that a regulation or a proposed regulation wording be brought at the next.
Be brought back to the board. Yes.
I'll make that motion. Will you second it, Joni?
I just made that motion.
Okay, I'll second it then. Somebody else has a burning desire to second. All right, on the motion, further discussion? I don't hear or see any, so let's take the vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Didn't hear any nays, so that's passed. Okay, good debate. All right, let's do item number 8, update on training. Valdez versus Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Jared Hickman. Just a quick update on training and kind of let the board know. This is for discussion only, so just let the board know kind of where we're headed right now and what our future thoughts are. Piggybacking off an NACJ training that was offered, Clark County Public Defenders Christy Craig and Nancy Lemke have agreed to put on their arguing for pretrial release after Valdez Jimenez to our attorneys. We've got 3 dates, the 26th of this month, July 16th, July 17th. It is a participation type CLE with a workshop attached to it, so we're good for 2 CLE hours. And as of right now, the 26th is filled up. The 16th has 5 people in it, and the 17th has 2 people in it. So we're quickly filling up those dates. That's part of kind of a long-term strategy in terms of CLE provision for the attorneys and the rules. Our goal is to provide at least 1 CLE per month at no cost to attorneys. We've got some ideas. Our idea board in the office is close to filled up with potentials that we can move forward with. So we've got this month covered. We've got next month covered. We're speaking with John Lambros potentially about August or September. So the idea, at least in terms of CLE, is that we can provide those once a month. That'll help us get our accredited CLE provider status with the CLE board at the same time fulfilling one of our statutory requirements in terms of training to attorneys in the rural counties. The next part of that we're looking at is in line with our request from the interim finance committee, is establishing a conference. Now that is supposed to be, or at least desired to be, a face-to-face conference where we can pull in indigent defense providers and attorneys from all over the state, get them at one location, not only for their CLE credits and an organized training format type conference, but also to facilitate the exchange of ideas, meeting those people that are fighting the same fight in different areas of the state and building those relationships. We've reached out to Professor Traum in terms of at least initially having our first one at the law school, in terms of finances. If we're able to get room there, it may be the most cost-effective option. And then the money that we got from IFC would go towards travel per diem for attorneys to show up at no cost to them. Those discussions are very, very much in initial stages, but the time frame that we're looking at is perhaps in the spring of next year, obviously depending on what happens with the pandemic and travel restrictions and things of that nature. So that's kind of our plan. And then once those travel restrictions are released, one of the things that we're kicking around and starting to put frame around is the formal organized training program specifically for attorneys that, come into the system, new attorneys that come into the system. I know the state public defender currently has one, as contracts switch over and newer attorneys come into those contracts. We'd like to have a, kind of a formal education program in place that covers, basics moving on up to ideally, and this is long-term, maybe even a trial type boot camp that is a week-long course that does, trial skills and things of that nature. So that's kind of the long-term end of that plan. But at least initially, as we're setting up the office and beginning these plans, we want to get one CLE a month and then graduate to the conference. One of the questions that we have for the board on this topic, though, is obviously with the budget limitations we currently have, paying for CLE providers is a difficult task. So if anyone has attended a CLE program that they thought was particularly well done, and they think that provider or faculty would be willing to do that again free of charge to our attorneys, I'd certainly would appreciate that information being passed on.
So you're asking one of those providers to do free training?
Correct.
John
and we've got and we do have a number of those lined up. Obviously, Christy Craig and Nancy Lemke have not asked for any compensation. John Lambros has agreed to do it at no cost. So if there's any others that people have attended and that information could be shared, we would certainly appreciate it.
Everybody get that?
Yep.
All right. Okay, let's do what we were talking about earlier, update on regulations. Where are we?
Yes, so update on regulations. Again, this is still Jared. If you can bear with me 1 second, I need to pull up one document that I plan on screen sharing here. Okay. So first, just generally, the status of our regulations, as previously discussed, the proposed regulations are with the Legislative Counsel Bureau. We made contact with them on the 11th. The response that we received is, to quote, is due to current circumstances, the process for drafting regulations can be delayed. They promised they would get back to us soon, but they are still pending the Legislative Counsel Bureau. Again, the reason for submission to the Legislative Counsel Bureau is not any type of unilateral action, but they were submitted to ensure that we met a deadline. Once we get any substantive changes back from the Legislative Counsel Bureau, we still fully plan on and intend to have a workshop to discuss other ideas, other ways to go about it, and get public comment on those issues. So I want to emphasize that this is not in any way an attempt to end around anyone, but just to make sure we were meeting the deadlines we needed to, and we still fully intend on having the workshop once they get back. That said, as we've been going through and meeting with the stakeholders in individual counties with respect to our regulations, we have been listening to that feedback and looking at our proposed regulations to see where potential problems are, what could be done better, and things of that nature. One of the issues that we are running up against in terms of feedback, and I think going back and looking, is the problem is an issue with judicial independence in terms of payment of extraordinary fees and case expenses without judicial approval. And we've addressed that in our bill draft request from our last meeting that substantially changes Chapter 7, but we still have to look towards the interim, before any bill drafts are approved and passed, and then also plan for the eventuality that perhaps maybe those particular requests do not get approved and passed. So that caused us to go back and take a look at how we are dealing with the issue of payment of extraordinary fees and case expenses. when we're looking at that, one of the concerns here is that the case law on regulations essentially provides deference to agencies so long as a regulation does not conflict with existing statutory authority. And as we know, Chapter 7, 7125, 7135, 7145 does vest the authority for counsel appointed to a defendant. They must go through the judiciary in order to get payment for those types of fees. So the question is, how do we get our regulations in conformance with existing statute, but also accomplish the goal that we as a department think is the right way to go, and be in compliance with the date of the settlement. Particularly, I just want to point out on page 11, lines 20 through 22, one of the requirements of that settlement is that in our contracts, we look at getting payment of extraordinary costs completed without judicial approval, and that the case-related expenses are funded separately, and again, without judicial approval, from the contract itself. So one of the powers that our board is one of the powers that is squarely vested within our board is the power to come up with a maximum, a formula for the maximum contribution of a county that they would have to pay for indigent defense services. So one potential solution is that we build these budgets through our formula for maximum contribution from the counties. Yesterday at about 3:30, 3:45, we sent out some draft language, and I'm going to screen share it real quick. So if anyone doesn't have it, we can take a look at it together. And since we are still in the, here we go. Since we are still in the process with LCB where they have not returned those regulations, in our conversations with them, if there is an amendment or a change to a regulation, we can still get that. We can submit that and get that considered with the current batch of proposed regulations. So one of the ways that one of the potential solutions in dealing with the judicial independence when it comes to payment of extraordinary fees and case-related expenses is to essentially build that into our maximum, our formula for maximum county contribution. And how we're looking at doing that is removing that as a cost for the counties. So in addition to, so the first part of this reads that the maximum county contribution will be the average of fiscal year 18-19 minus expenses related to murder cases and capital cases. And for counties whose population is less than 100,000, those case-related expenses, plus the percentage equal to the lesser of either the West Region Consumer Price Index or the union negotiated cost of living increase. So essentially, we take that out of the county's contribution, and then how we rope it back in to make sure that the minimum constitutional requirements for indigent defense are met is that we make that a state obligation in subsection 2. So we say case-related expenses for counties whose population is less than 100,000 shall be a charge against the state, budgeted to the department and administered pursuant to the county's plan for the provision of indigent defense by the department or the department's designee. Now that language is in line with the bill draft request we submitted to for Chapter 7 at our last meeting. That essentially the county's model plan or the county's plan, governs how those expenses are submitted and paid. This language was considered, the department or the department's designee to provide administrators where counties are providing these services via the contract method, so the department could actually be that administrator. But where the county has already set up a public defender office, we don't, there's already a person there that can be, I guess, accountable for the fiscal expenditures of the public defender's office. So that would essentially, the public defender in the county would essentially be the designee pursuant to that plan. And so that's essentially subsection 2. Subsection 3 is again clarification regarding counties who opt in to the state public defender for death penalty cases and or direct appeals is just making sure that, you know, it's clear that those cases for counties who opt in are charges against the state and excluded from the county's contribution, to make it very, very clear that if a county does opt in, the cost of those will be provided by the state and not the county itself. So this is our, just to make sure we can, you know, accomplish what we are required to do by the Davis litigation, and also what we originally set out in our proposed regulations and standards. This is a potential workaround to the issue of Chapter 7 and existing statutory law. And so we're submitting this for discussion as to how it could be improved. But ultimately, the question that we're presenting to the board today is that we'd like to submit this in addition with our proposed regulations. So when it comes back out, we're ready for workshop public comment on this.
Are we going to get told by LCB that you can't do this because the law doesn't allow you to do it right now under Chapter 7?
So that's the concern with the as it pertains to judicial independence, the current proposed legislation or regulation is just simply judicial independence in terms of payment of these types of expenses. We want to remove that from the judiciary. But because Chapter 7 requires that to be done by the judiciary currently, you know, we're looking at potential other ways to do it. And we think that this particular manner squares it in, you know, the board's financial powers, right? The board must come up with a formula that sets a county's max contribution. So if we remove it from the county's contribution, we still have to provide it to make sure minimum constitutional obligations are met. This gives us, you know, kind of that workaround. Okay. And that's in line with existing case law. I don't want to, you know, bore everyone on the research, but you know, one of the interesting things is the Sixth Amendment study cited in 1969 case that essentially tested the issue of a death penalty case bankrupting a county, but because the statutes were drafted a certain way, those expenses had to be borne by the county. That case also said, perhaps in dicta, but perhaps not, that if the legislature comes up with another way to obligate the state to pay for these types of expenses, it would be a different, you know, the outcome in that case would have been different. Well, with, you know, AB 81 and the requirement that we set a maximum contribution for the counties, you know, I think we've got another way to do that.
All right. Questions to Jared? Anybody?
No, excellent presentation.
All right, well, to entertain a motion to transmit this regulation, it's unnumbered right now, dealing with the maximum amount of county contributions for indigent defense services under 180.320 of the Nevada revised statutes, to take a motion to send that over to LCB and combine with our other regulations we've got under consideration.
This is Chris. I'll make the motion.
All right, Chris. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Sure, I'll second it.
All right, we've got a lot of seconds. Okay. On the motion, further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay? Carried. Okay. Thanks, Jared. And if you get that through LCB, Chris is going to want to know you did that. Okay. All right. Let's pick up next meetings. Marcy, why don't you take this one? See where you want to go. What do you want to do?
Well, we have had requests from certain board members if we can set our board meetings out for a significant period of time for scheduling purposes. I am proposing the next year of meetings if we'd like to continue to meet monthly so that we can reserve rooms when they're available. And then also so that individuals can keep their calendars open. These basically represent the fourth Thursday of the month, except for November and December, which has the holidays. So I'm requesting if we can set these dates so that our department can reserve the rooms in Vegas as well as Carson, and so people can schedule things.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the year 2020 and 2021 meeting dates as recommended by staff.
So I do have a couple of questions.
Let's do it like this, Jim. Let's say there's a motion, is there a second so we can discuss it? Somebody want to discuss that, just to put it on the floor.
I'm Laura. I will second it.
All right, it's on. Jeff, go ahead.
So the first question is, once we get ourselves organized and have the legislation done and our regulations and the contracts, I'm not quite sure we're going to need monthly meetings while we're waiting for the folks to do their work. And second of all, at least for Drew and I, July 23rd, we have the Clark County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council that we're both on, and I'm chair of the Domestic Violence Subcommittee and have to make presentations and such.
All right.
That day is not very good for me either.
Jeff, it's Joni Eastley. I guess we can change the meeting, move the meeting on July 23rd, but I would prefer to set all of these meetings, and if we don't need them, we can always cancel them.
Okay. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just.
I know you're not. I know.
Well, we're not going to put anybody in that kind of a bind. They have to make that decision.
So why don't we set the July meeting for the 22nd? That works for everybody, and then keep the fourth Thursday except for November, December. Is that what Marcy said?
Yeah, because of the holidays.
Right.
But you're gonna have to repeat that for me.
So Chris, you're saying July 22nd?
I'm just suggesting July 22nd.
Yeah.
We're meeting on,
Okay.
yeah, just to accommodate that now, and then stick with the fourth Thursday
Okay.
at 1.
Is that all right? With the idea that if we have to cancel, we'll cancel.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, I'll amend my motion to move the July 23rd meeting to July 22nd,
Okay.
but keeping the rest of the schedule as recommended by staff.
All right. Then we'll do that. I assume the makers of the second, people who seconded will agree to that amendment.
Absolutely.
Okay, agreed. All right. Further discussion on food. Restaurant.
Feedback.
Oh, okay. Feedback? All right. All right. I'm out of here, out of my job at the end of this year, but I will make sure that we get this conference room if they still want to use it up here. It's a little bigger room, but I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a guy.
You're going to stay on the committee, right?
I'm staying on it. I've got another couple of years on the committee, but I'm termed out on me.
Yeah, no parole for Bob.
Yeah. All right. On the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Do we do that already?
I don't know.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, motion is carried. Now we're on item 11, concluding public comment.
Oh, thank God.
Do we have any? Nobody has anything there?
Nope.
You want anything up in your area? Julie? Kavanaugh?
Sorry, I was on mute. No,
Oh,
nothing
on
new.
mute. You okay up there?
Yep, we're doing good. If it
All right.
stops, nope. Hailed yesterday.
All right, we also have, and I missed this one, but we could always put this on items of interest for future agenda items. Anybody have any that they want to have put on? I don't see any now, but if you do, this will be a standing agenda item so that we can move in that direction if we have to. All right. Are we ready to adjourn, folks?
We are.
We are? All right. All right. Unless there's an objection, then we're now adjourned until the next regularly scheduled meeting of Board of Indigent Defense, which will be July 22nd, 2020. All right. Thanks to everybody for putting up with everything here. We're getting.
Thank you. Thanks to staff.
Thank you.
Thanks to you folks out there. I mean, it's really nice to have this kind of brain power around. Really, you folks, not guys, all of you outside this room. Very good stuff. Thanks. All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Stay well, wear a mask.
Thank you.
All right.